So our first bit of news, as I say, is just Epic versus Apple, and we're really kind of going to try and delve into this a little bit and maybe elucidate the core issue for you. So as a refresher, for those of you who aren't aware, Epic think that the cut that Apple take of every purchase made on iOS, especially Fortnite's in-game currency known as V-Bucks, is unfair, so they think that the percentage that Apple's taking is too much. And this has been escalating for a while, and ultimately resulted in Fortnite circumventing Apple's payment measures and Apple removing Fortnite from the App Store on iOS. This case has finally gone to court this week, where senior figures from both companies and related companies from right across the games industry have been testifying to Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. And there's simply too much coming out of this case for us to talk about everything. Every day there's like dozens of stories based on the kind of discovery that the courts have made and the things they're talking about in testimony. But we're going to try and cover some of the biggest stories for you today and talk about what they mean for games and what they reveal about some of gaming's biggest companies. It's still too early to tell you which way the case is going to go, by the way. If you're interested in our opinion on that, we can't really tell.
We're not giving the verdict? Are we not giving the verdict?
No, we haven't got the exclusive on the verdict, unfortunately.
God damn it.
But one of the cornerstones of the American justice system is this public record of documentation, which means that the game industry, which is traditionally very secretive, has been somewhat laid bare this week. Lots of internal documents and communications from Epic and also all of Epic's partners. So just been released onto the internet, basically, for anyone to look at. And there's no video from the trial, but there is audio. So essentially anyone can tune in at any point to listen to testimony from Tim Cook, Tim Sweeney, other figures at Epic and related games companies. So we're going to get started with our first story, and before we get into the documents and what they say, our first story is about the practicalities of this remote trial that's taking place and this kind of audio line, perhaps highlighting the technology gap that exists between the most ardent gamers and the wider public. When the court opened session, fans of Fortnite were able to invade proceedings and yell things like "Free Fortnite" on the court audio phone line, disrupting the start of the session by 20 minutes. So the idea behind this public line is you're supposed to be able to dial in and listen, but you're supposed to be muted. You're not supposed to have the ability to speak. And the court didn't quite get that right, and there was hundreds of people able to speak at will on this very crowded phone line for a little while there. But it just goes to show you how much fan interest there is in this in this story. What do you make of this, Ben?
Yeah, it's kind of like when the Facebook trial was happening, and people who are used to it are kind of like, these guys are asking how the internet works. Like, this is ridiculous. And then you get this, and it's kind of like, oh, we've got this high-profile court case between two large technological companies, and we can't work the phone line. It's pretty funny, but yeah, it's interesting in that it's getting, and I would say, younger people interested in this. Like, typically, like, what's going on in legal battles isn't of interest to young people, and albeit this is kind of humorous and what happened, but on a bigger note, it's getting people interested and watching what's going on in legal proceedings. So
yeah, and we can't recommend it. Like, you could get charged with contempt of court, so don't do it. If you get the chance to shout something out during the Fortnite trial. Don't do it. Let's get into some documents and some hard numbers for you then. So one of the first court filings to come out have revealed that Fortnite made $9 billion in 2 years, which gives you some idea of why this court case is so important to both companies. We're talking about potentially a big cut of a lot of money. So, games are fun. Games are a pastime for a lot of us, but they're also very big business. And there's a lot of money on the line here for both companies, which is why they would take it this far in the first place. And I guess you have anything to say about that, Ben? You want to talk about the money at this point?
Yeah, so I won't go too deep into it because I'm going to touch on the money kind of things after the pre-recorded segment. But essentially, earning, as you say, that's a whole chunk of money, and it seems maybe arbitrary, 12%, 30%. That's a big lot of 9 billion. If you change that from 30 to 12, it's a huge amount more money in Epic's pocket, or it's a huge amount more money out of Apple's pockets. Here, you can see why they're fighting so hard for it, and it also kind of demonstrates kind of some of the stuff we'll talk about with the free game strategy and the money that's being invested into Epic as to why they're willing to do that investment and that they're justifying that they can afford to do it.
Yeah. So one of the first companies to have their dirty laundry aired on the internet as a result of this is Sony. So a lot of their documents were released, internal discussions, emails, communications. Sony has a historic reluctance to allow cross-platform play. The company initially blocked it for Rocket League and Minecraft back in 2017, and this was also the case in Fortnite, but Sony did eventually relent and kind of allowed Fortnite to have cross-platform play on the PlayStation, and they do seem to be good friends now. However, documents reveal a number of senior Epic figures playing hardball in emails with Sony, culminating in a scathing email from Tim Sweeney, who's the CEO of Epic, which reads, I'm going to do a little quote for you here from the letter, "Frankly, we do not believe Sony's position is even legal. Epic will enable full interoperability between all platforms in Fortnite at a timely point in the future. Please understand that Epic firmly believes that this is a matter of legal right and moral duty. We are prepared to pursue this course with all available resources wherever it leads us and for however long." So pretty strong words there, and obviously they came to some arrangement, and the arrangement was also discussed in court, and Sony have made off with some good money here, because Sweeney confirmed in court testimony that Sony is the only platform out of the big three and major PC vendors that asks for cross-play compensation. So if you're cross-play on PlayStation, you have to pay Sony money to allow that to happen. He stated that Epic agreed to pay these fees to enable cross-play in the PlayStation version of Fortnite, kind of smooth things over after their initial rocky discussion. And yeah, that's like an interesting thing that's come out there. And I guess, I mean, Microsoft might be looking at their books now like, why didn't we charge for this? Because all the other platform holders are just happy for cross-play to be a thing. It's increasingly supported by fan demand and fan consensus, as they like cross-play, it enables them to play with their friends regardless of which console they have. So it's good for consumers, definitely, cross-play, but there's not always seemed that clear to vendors and platform holders that cross-play is a good thing to support or to allow. What do you make of this, Ben?
Yeah, I hope that rather than Microsoft looking going like, oh, we should have charged, I hope Sony looks at it and is like, we were in the wrong there, because, you know, I get about platform exclusives, like I'm not saying like that's obviously a different thing, but having a platform exclusive game is to try and get you to buy that console, which is understandable. But if you have a game which can be played across all of them, you know, I don't know about the legal rights and whether Epic are right that it's a legal right, but for me as a consumer and looking at it for the wider benefit of, you know, the games community, I would like to see crossplay, and then the onus is on, you know, the consoles, your Sony's, your Microsoft, to make your console the one that people want to buy. If you stop people from doing it because they can't play the game on it, then, you know, that speaks a lack of confidence in your own product, and that takes away from the competitive nature. And as I said on the previous show, like competition makes everybody better. So I'd rather see that. I'd rather see the crossplay, and I hope Sony look and go, okay, yeah, we were probably in the wrong there, and not the other way around. That everyone else like, okay, maybe I will start charging for that luxury.
Well, speaking about money and Microsoft, they've actually taken to the stand, or one of them has, one of their senior figures, which we'll talk about more in a second, and a lot of their documents have also been made public. Due to some of these documents filed in court, we now know about some of the internal discussions that Microsoft had about revenue at the company. So Microsoft's Xbox division takes a 30% cut on every digital sale on Xbox consoles, and their documents and discussions reveal that they had considered cutting it to 12%. So EtchPlay fans will know that we recently discussed in one of our roundups that Microsoft did go on to introduce this change on PC, but not on Xbox consoles. And from the testimony, it sounds like this is unlikely to change. Laurie Wright, head of business development at Xbox, has been testifying and talking about the Xbox business model, and she revealed that Microsoft have actually never made money on the sales of an Xbox console. So selling a console is always a loss-leading exercise for them, which we knew was true at the start of generations, but we thought maybe wasn't always true. And she's revealed that all their profit comes from the commission that they make on games and subscriptions. So they thought about it, they discussed it, but they realised that in order to keep the Xbox division as a concept profitable, that the level of commission had to stay at 30% on the Xbox console side of things. So interesting that they've done that, and it creates like a slight difference between selling your game on PC through the Xbox store to selling it on the Xbox console. But I guess Microsoft, they've run the numbers here. they need that. They can't give it away. There's an investment in the Xbox as a console, as a platform, that they need to try and recuperate. There's a lot of Microsoft stuff, so I'm going to keep going. Microsoft's feud with Apple over xCloud on iOS got a rival kicked from the App Store. So in 2020, you might remember Microsoft was battling to bring xCloud, also known as Xbox Game Streaming, to the iPhone and iPad, and the conversations had an unlikely victim, which is Shadow. You might have heard of Shadow before. It's a third-party cloud gaming app that lets you stream PC games to an iPhone or iPad from your computer. So emails between Microsoft and Apple revealed during the court case show that the Xbox maker was trying to, persuade Apple to allow xCloud, and basically said, "What about these guys? Like, how are they allowed to do what they're doing if we're not allowed to put ours on?" And Apple's response was basically, "Oh yeah," and they took down the other app as well. So Laurie Wright again was on the stand during this bit of the proceedings. And she says, "We were showing 2 examples where a game or application was able to exist, and we didn't understand why we couldn't. I believe they ended up pulling Shadow out of the App Store based off this email we sent until they submitted changes. That was not our intention, of course." xCloud, now called Xbox Cloud Gaming, is now available for beta on the web, which is a kind of workaround that allows the service to be usable on iOS devices. We checked it out last week. You can catch that on YouTube if you missed it. So yeah, a lot of Microsoft's internal dealings there revealed, which is interesting, both in terms of their revenue and in terms of their efforts to get xCloud to a wider audience on iOS. What do you reckon, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue if they've run the numbers and they can show, hey, we need to take this much, otherwise we don't make money. I mean, I guess that's a big part of the argument in the Apple Epic thing, is they're like, hey, Epic, you're running a business model that won't make you any money. So I think that that's fair enough. I mean, all Microsoft could do it is to look to make changes that that they can take less and still make a profit, which I'm sure they would like to do to reduce their costs. Might not mean that they drop their percentage, but you can't argue with it. They're not going to actively do something which is going to lose them money, because why would you? That's just bad business. And in terms of the Shadow thing, I mean, Microsoft are going to look like the bad guys there, but they're trying to get their own product into the store, and you would, if you saw someone doing something similar, that would form the basis of your argument, is that you can't have that if we can't have this. Obviously, that's bad for Shadow that they got pulled, but I mean that was just a lack of consistency from Apple, which was brought to light, and unfortunately is just a casualty of a bigger conversation and a bigger argument going on. But I wouldn't really call Microsoft out for doing that as taking down a little guy. I mean, you would do that if it was.
I don't think they meant to. Yeah, I don't think there was deliberate. Yeah. Speaking of Xbox's relationship with their competitors, one last thing from them. I just thought this was interesting, just as a bit of kind of flavour about how the Xbox division is being run at the minute. So one of the things that came up during their document exposure was their internal review documents, kind of showing how thoroughly they examine their competitors. So one such document, a review of The Last of Us Part 2, which is obviously a PlayStation game, was full of high praise for the Sony-published title and made recommendations to the wider Xbox team about the level of quality and polish that they should be aiming for with future AAA titles. And I've got a quote here from the review which says, "The visual quality and attention to detail in The Last of Us Part 2 is absolutely best in class in basically every area, and the overall presentation is significantly ahead of anything that other teams have been producing on console and PC." So interesting to see them looking at the competition, and I guess they're not kidding themselves. They're being quite honest that these guys have done something really good, really successful, really technically impressive. Why are we not doing that? It wasn't all positive though, with why the internal reviewer did also note that Naughty Dog, who are the developers, still can't seem to make decent gun combat in any of their games. So that's a little bit of sass that they didn't necessarily expect to go public. But I mean, I guess we would have probably assumed they were doing stuff like this. It's just strange to see it in public. It's strange to see someone from Xbox openly acknowledging, we're playing these PlayStation games and thinking, how can we make games like this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if they weren't doing that. In fact, it feels like it would be irresponsible to not be doing that. Because I mean, let's face it, games is a grown-up industry now. It's a very grown-up industry. It's still growing up, but it's getting there. And that's what you do in a sensible business. You look at your competitors and you look how you can get better. That's how you keep getting better. Going back to the competition makes everybody better. Why would you not be looking at your biggest competitors and seeing what they're doing well and how you can match it or improve, and look at what they're not doing well and do that even better to give you a better competitive advantage? totally get your point, but it's weird to see it openly stated. But yeah, I'd be more surprised and really disappointed if they weren't doing it.
Yeah.
It would just be silly if they weren't.
We'll talk about this a bit more later in the show, but some other interesting tidbits that have come out of Epic's business records, I guess. So Epic expects the game store to be profitable by 2024, having recently admitted that the service loses money and has been the subject of heavy financial investment from the company. And the case continues, and although the companies involved all seem keen for further information to be redacted, like nobody really wants these secrets to be out there, apparently the judge is getting sick of fielding requests from tech companies to keep their documents secret. It seems very likely that we're going to get more and more later today and for the next few days as well as these proceedings continue before they finish.